Hello, my name is David T. Chapman. I am presenting Storm Chasing in Ontario. Just to give you a bit of a background about myself, my dad and I have been chasing now together for 20 years. And basically we started out where we were using AM radio to zero in on storms if we couldn't see, if it was one of those overcast type days. And basically, so we'd try to zero in on the storm by the crackling between us and say London or Toronto. We'd use an AM station to do so and zero in on them. And then eventually in around 2009, 2010, we got portable internet with the laptops. And now to give you an idea, we basically do all our chasing off smartphones. So it does give you an idea how much we have seen technology change over recent years. And so as you can see, this is my dad. He's still running in that from camera to camera if he needs to. But first thing we're going to start off with is basically lightning. Lightning is what I consider to be the most dangerous thing out there because you can't truly predict where it is going to be next. Whereas I find if you're zeroing in on a tornado or a rotating wall cloud or straight line winds with the gust fronts and shelf clouds, you can still generally position yourself so that you don't put yourself in harm's way. Whereas lightning, you truly don't know where it's going to strike next. So one of the things with lightning is most of the lightning happens underneath the storm, but there is the types of lightning that can actually reach out from it, and you will see that later on in the program. So one of the first things with the with lightning is the fact that how does it start? And basically what you have is a warm-up draft that's building a towering cumulus cloud, and as that cloud gets higher up into the atmosphere, it starts to get colder, and there's ice crystals and hail, and they start to kind of clatter off each other, and it starts to build up a charge of both positive and negative. And as that starts to happen, you start to get an imbalance in the cloud. So usually you get your intercloud lightning. But as those storms get bigger, and it also creates an imbalance with the ground as well, and that is when you get a negative, basically negative feeler coming down and then a positive streamer that starts to stem upwards to meet it. So that could come from a tree, it can come from a house, it can even come from a person. And so as it comes down, it chooses one of those to connect with. Sometimes you have multiple strikes, but in this case we'll talk about one. And when it meets with that, that is when you get the complete discharge. So as you can see in this photo here, this is right after the discharge of the lightning. Now we're going to look at video here. That was real time, but we're also going to take a look at it in slow motion there. So as you can see, it surges across the cloud. There is one that makes a kind of a push towards the ground, but then you see the full connection quickly happen after that point. So here's an actual photo of it. I was working 2 cameras at the time. And you can actually see where the lightning went right through that gust front. And one of the neat things about that is the fact that lightning can be actually 5 times hotter than the surface of the sun. So you're looking at about 30,000 degrees Celsius, 50,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Lightning also can come out a good distance out of the back of the storm. So you'll watch it surge to the cloud here. I have it in slow motion so you can see it all take place. And then basically you'll see the cloud to ground lightning strike as well as the cloud to cloud lightning strike, because there was another storm actually to the right of the screen that you're looking at. So that can happen. And then there was this gust front in Mitchell's Bay. And with this one, it was interesting because I was standing beside some people at the beach there, and they asked me, when should we go and seek shelter? And I said, probably about 5 to 10 minutes ago. So as you can see, as chasers, we sometimes have to push it a little bit more. Oftentimes we'll put our camera outside, and then we'll be in the vehicle just to add a little safety to it. Then you can actually see lightning hitting outside of the rain core there. Well, that can actually start little kind of grass fires, forest fires, little bush fires in southern Ontario, but anywhere like northern Ontario or the west coast or anywhere with large forest areas, that's when you can get some major forest fires created by that. Now we have upward lightning, and upward lightning is something where basically it goes from the ground up. So what happens is you usually have a nearby cloud to ground lightning strike, and then all of a sudden within about a split second later you basically have this upward moving channel go up, and they usually come from radio towers or even the CN tower, for example. You've seen photos of it being struck. Well, it's actually it striking the sky. In this here, well, you're going to actually get to see in a moment where basically you have the cloud to ground lightning strike, and then look at these little beads afterwards. Those are called nitrates, and that's from the lightning heating up the air so much it takes a nitrogen in the air and then basically turns it to nitrates as it falls towards the earth in rain, and actually acts like a natural fertilizer. Now you're going to see some of that lightning I was talking about earlier. This is called bolt from the blue lightning. And basically what you're seeing is the lightning comes right out of the storm. So this can actually happen 5, 10, 20 kilometers away from the storm. That's why they say wait at least a half an hour after you've heard the last rumble of thunder before you go back outside, because this is some of the most dangerous type of lightning. And you can basically see it coming right out of the cloud there all the way down to the surface and completely leaving the storm. They often come from the upper parts of the storm too, where it's the anvil or upper middle part as well too. And you can see this one started out as one, and then as it went through the cloud, it actually split into about 3 to 4 different channels there. But they are beautiful to look at when at night because of the fact you can see the whole thunderhead and then the lightning coming right out of it. This is the closest lightning strike we've ever actually had happen to us. We'd actually just been outside of there about 2.5 minutes earlier, and I said, I've been watching the lightning march towards us. Let's get in the vehicle, but point the dash cam this way, and you can actually see right where the lightning hit right in the woods there. So it was pretty impressive to see it that close, and then to actually capture it on video as well too, as it goes right into the trees. All of this lightning you're about to see, I do put into slow motion. It actually happened in 9/10 of a second, so you can see all the multiple strikes across the screen here, which was pretty phenomenal to see. I did not see them all with the eye, and I did not capture them all with my photo camera. I had the video going, which did capture them all, but my photo camera actually missed a few itself. So you're going to see that here in a moment, but there's the final discharge, basically completely draining out there as it pulses to the end. So there's the photo I caught. So you can see there's about 6 of them there. I was pretty happy with that, but then when I reviewed the video, I realized I'd missed about 3 or 4 strikes as well. Now we move on to gust fronts and shelf clouds, and this one actually had the hail core behind it near Godridge. But basically what these are is they can be small, 10 to 20 kilometers in length, or they can stretch across a province and right into the states. So what you see here is you saw a gust front there, that rough edge. And basically that is where the warm and the cold air are colliding. So here we are looking over Stony Creek in Hamilton, and you can see kind of that rough edge to it. Well, it's got warm air in front of it and then the rain-cooled air behind it. Sometimes that's hail as well too, but in this case it was all rain, and it's meeting that warm air out in front, and that's why you get that turbulent cloud there, and basically that is where your strongest winds are likely going to be. So sometimes, though, they actually completely separate themselves from the storm. They're technically called an outflow boundary. And this storm here went basically from south to north into Toronto, but the gust front and shelf cloud basically pushed west to east and went through the Niagara region here. So this is it over the Welland Canal. So what was neat about that was the fact that there was no rain or anything really behind it. I got hit with a few drops, but overall it was just this shelf cloud feature without anything to it. And they can sometimes form roll clouds as well. So it's an outflow boundary. It can be called a shelf cloud. If it's a roll cloud on its own, then that's what it is as well. It's your roll cloud. But this is how this one formed here. We have the towering cumulus behind basically a few small cumulonimbus, because we did hear some lightning with it. But here's your gust front shelf cloud. You can see the formation of it, very rough on the front of it, and then when you get to the back side, that's when you can see kind of these different features to it, which we will cover in a moment. Now again, here's your entire thunderstorm. It's about 28,000 feet in height, and then you have the shelf cloud pushing out towards you, and you can kind of see how it's leaving the storm. It's gusting out at this point, and there's your turbulent air behind where the warm and the cold is mixing. So here's the back side of it, and basically sometimes what will happen is the whole storm will collapse behind it, and it'll just leave again that kind of shelf cloud feature. And then at sunset it looks beautiful because you can see the orange colors there really coming through right at that time. This storm though was fully developed and had no issue with the sun coming through the back. You can actually see the hail core in the background, but at the surface there, that's where you can see your wind, and you can basically see the dust that's kicking up from it, as well as probably some small debris in it as well too. This is what can happen though in May and June in Ontario. We farmers plow their fields, if we go through a kind of a small period of dry weather and a gust front gets ahead of the storm, well, when it hits with those winds, it's got that kind of dry dust and soil, and that's where we get these brownouts. We're used to our whiteouts in Canada, but in this case, it's more of a brownout. And so you couldn't really see much with it. It's a little bit better during the day, because you can actually see how high some of this dust is getting. So you can look in the background. It's getting up to about 200 feet or so, 60, 75 meters in height. And overall, you can just see it all just being swept across. And this lasted for about a half an hour or so, because the cold front came through. There was really no rain with it, but it was just continuously blowing dust. Whereas this is more of kind of your severe looking storm. You can see the lightning coming out of the front there. But there's your rough gust front at the bottom, and then the beautiful layering above as well. And you can see how surface based that is. So generally the more surface based the storm is, the more severe it is. But sometimes those elevated ones can produce large hail and even strong winds with them too. And there was also a bit of arcing as well, as you can see here. It was raining, and very heavy rain, and there was strong winds, and it caused a bit of arcing in the wires. So what happens when that goes over? Well, there goes your shelf cloud, and you're on the back side of it. This is called whale's mouth. Now, I've never put my head in the mouth of a whale, but overall, apparently that's the pattern they have. And sometimes you do get a separation between the rain core and then the shelf cloud in front. So that's where you kind of get a gap. Sometimes I've seen it as much as 10 to 15 kilometers, that gap before the rain and the hail potentially hits. So here's some of the stronger winds as we get into the core. This is an example of a wet microburst where a pine tree was actually snapped just 75 meters or so away from us. And I like to call this one the photographer eating some soil or dust, because of the fact that he's smiling at the same time as doing video, and therefore I was crunching it for about an hour and 15 minutes after. But you can see here where basically we changed sides, and now you can see the rain has hit, and we did actually have some nickel-sized hail with that one later on as well too. You'll see my dad change positions here. Basically, he's changing positions to just make sure if the winds get too strong that there's no threat of us being blown into the ditch. Generally, straight line winds won't do that. It's more transport trucks that have to worry about that, but still sometimes we'll make that move just in case. And then here's an example of a thunderstorm in winter. There was actually 3 lightning strikes with this one, but this is actually caused by lake effects. So the lake itself is about maybe 1-2 degrees Celsius, so we're looking at 34, 35, 36 degrees Fahrenheit. And what's happened is there's very cold temperatures at the 850 millibar level, or 1500 meter level, and that is caused enough of a difference for this instability to form over the lake, and you have at least a 13 degree difference. This day I believe it was around 16 to 18 degrees difference, and you can actually see the rotation in the clouds here, because this actually helps form water spouts, or in this case they would have been snow spouts. But you can see once it went over land there, basically they elevated and dissipated. That's because all the energy was over the lake. As soon as it went over land, it was too cool for it to keep feeding off the lake's energy. And this is a cold front that's going through with cold front snow squalls, and they can sometimes have lightning with them if it's a very sharp cold front, but often they will have very strong winds with them. And I also enjoy photographing and doing video of steam devils, and generally I need about an 18 to 20 degree difference for that kind of steam to be rising off the water, or mist. And so what you're seeing here is Arctic sea smoke, and in the background there, that's actually a snow spout. You could see it lasted for about 3 minutes and had very vigorous motion to it as well too. So it was quite intense, and there was a water spout advisory for that day, or in this case snow spout, because it is below freezing. But most of the time steam devils are actually very weak. So this is a steam devil compared to the snow spout. You can see just the slow rotation with it, not much activity with it, and it's just kind of rotating as it goes across the water's surface. So if that was to pass through you, I've had that a couple times myself, you feel just a little bit of a breeze, but it does burn because of that super cooled, basically water vapor, and you can feel it hit your skin, and it just gives that real burning feeling. But overall, watching them is quite enjoyable, as you can see them kind of spin up over the lake there, and then they can even form on little spring-fed water holes, and you can actually even see them in the summer and fall. You just need that temperature difference to create a mist over the water basically. So now we warm things back up again, and This is your, typical kind of CU field or cumulus cloud that's trying to tower upwards. At first, they may have trouble kind of getting to the next level, and then that's when you start to see them kind of turn into these towering cumulus or cumulonimbus clouds. So this is your garden variety storm, basically, where it lasted for about an hour before completely collapsing out. And you can see that the updraft is on the right side there. Now it's gone. You can just see it kind of flattening out. So overall, we know that that storm is basically done at that point. So how do they build? Well, often they build where there's warm moist air into the base of the storm. So this one's becoming surface based, where you have warm moist air coming from the ground, it's going up and feeding the storm. And we also call this the business end of the storm, because you can have lowerings, and these lowerings aren't rotating, and then you can have rotating wall clouds, which are both in the same section of the storm, but because they're rotating, these are what can form the tornadoes. So what you're looking at here is a rotating wall cloud on a supercell near Dundalk, Ontario, and you can kind of see almost an attempt at a funnel cloud basically forming in the center left there. But that storm is being fed by this warm moist air, and it creates all these updrafts. So you can see the updraft there, and then right across there's your anvil, and then the anvil overshoot, which is a sign that that updraft has basically is very strong. It's very intense because it's overpowering the upper level winds. When these storms start to collapse, they tend to look wispy. So here's kind of your wispy paintbrush cloud where it's kind of taken away. So what's usually happening at the bottom of the cloud? Well, that area where the warm moist air was going into is collapsing, and you'll often see it elevating when it does. You'll even see rain coming right down through where it was once taking moisture in. So you can see that happening on this storm here. And that's generally why you'll have that kind of wispy look in the distance if a storm has finally collapsed. So this is a tornado-warned storm heading into Elmer. And you can actually see what we're looking for. A lot of storms in Ontario are rain-wrapped, or when it comes to their wall clouds or the tornado potential. So here's your rain curtains, and what we're looking for is kind of curvature inwards towards it. So you have your rotating wall cloud in there, even a rainbow just to add a little more confusion to it. But inside there, we can tell by both radar as well as the shape of things that we have a rotating wall cloud inside that, and it could produce a tornado at any point. Fortunately, it did not, because it was heading into the town of Elmer at that point. And actually, very shortly after that, the tornado warning was dropped, and the storm began to outflow, or basically gust out. So the cold air is becoming more dominant than the warm, moist air going into it. So what it did cause, though, was this beautiful feature on it where you can now see the clouds starting to separate from the storm, and you actually have clearing on both sides of this shelf cloud that is basically turning into a roll cloud at this point. So there you go, you have a much better view, and these roll clouds can go on for, I've seen them go for 100 kilometers on radar, and then this one here wasn't so much, I'd say about 30-40 k. And you can see that rolling feature. So you have your warm moist air rising up on the front, and then you have your cold sinking air on the back of it. So now we take a look back to the east at the storm, and you can actually see where the horizontal shear, I speed it up in the time lapse so you can actually see it rolling, and you can see on the front the warm air going up and then it coils down. Well, that's that horizontal shear. If there was enough warm moist air going into it, it would potentially be able to form a funnel cloud or a tornado if it got strong enough to do so. So now you can actually see this roll cloud feature further out, and then note that cloud in the background right by that windmill. You can actually see it. I want you to note it because we do come back to it later, and that because of the fact that this roll cloud interacts with it, and you'll see what it does to it a little later on. So as we head towards Port Burwell, we're getting close to the lake. They actually have a static display of a submarine there, so my dad and I will often joke that we're going to basically change vehicles, hop out of our chase vehicle, and then go into the submarine after and continue on to chase most of the storms that then eventually do cross the lake. So overall, you can see how it's basically the clouds still being pulled into this storm, and that's what you can see again at the mid levels. There's cloud going into it, even some lightning still, and this storm actually doesn't go wispy as it collapses. It just gets smaller, and you'll see it get smaller and smaller here, and the lightning basically quits at this point. So it just shrinks right down and basically turns into a towering cumulus cloud. Now we go back to this roll cloud. So remember I told you to note that cloud because of the fact that it interacted with this roll cloud. And here's that cloud there. So you can actually see it. And I want you to note right in the lightning strikes right about here, see that kind of stringy cloud right near the lightning strikes there? That's what's left over the roll cloud. So when it went underneath the storm, it actually caused quite a bit of lift. And when it caused that lift, basically, it allowed for the storm to build quickly. So you got a lot of lightning with it, but then as it kind of got undercut by that cold air, as well as the storm just weakening itself, eventually it slows right down to kind of what you're seeing right here. But I love storms with the stars above it. And here's an example. So funny story with this one. About 2 weeks earlier for Canada Day, I'd been out with my family. I left the camera at home and said I just want to spend time with them. And then sure enough, these towering cumulus clouds started to form. Long story short, my family was watching the fireworks and I was watching the thunderstorms to the south. And after rushing to get there, get out of there, which is hard to do in fireworks lines, I only got about 2 lightning pictures that night. Whereas this one here, I said the next time I saw a storm like that or a towering cumulus cloud like that, I was going to be out there for the first strike. Sure enough, I was. And this was like 500 lightning pictures out of 700 to 800. It was a tremendous time lapse because lightning was almost basically every second and a half. So now we're going to look at the structure of a tornado-warned supercell here down near Chatham. You can see it just all of a sudden explodes. What's really neat about that was that updraft only took about 11 minutes to go from 15,000 feet up to 44,000 feet. So very robust lift and instability with that storm. So we do a comparison here. There's your garden variety storm. Kind of almost looks like multiple updrafts, whereas the one down to your right there, that's your true thruster where it's really driving upwards. So here's the backside of a supercell here. Notice how it's kind of got a bit of a corkscrew turned spin to it, and then it kind of just goes into normal updraft. So it transitioned from a supercell into basically your typical storm. It was still strong, but it lost its rotation at that point. Then we have what are called pileus clouds. These form on top of updrafts as well too. And it's a sign of a strong updraft. So this was a tornado-warned storm down near Cleveland. I was documenting it from the Ontario side. And here's a tornado-warned storm down near the Niagara region, down near Port Colborne, and you can see it turning in on itself. So if you look to the right of your screen, you can actually see the cloud moving right to left at the base and then wrapping around near the center there. And you can see it wrapping around, but it's also dissipating at the same time. And that's just because there wasn't enough moist air. It had the wind shear, but it did not have the warm, moist air to feed it. So it remained kind of elevated. It did make a few attempts at lifting scud and maybe even a few funnels, but overall it wasn't able to get organized enough to produce a tornado, which was good because they were actually having a bit of a festival in the Port Colborne area and that along the canal, so that did actually work out quite well. And then you can see here we have 2 areas of rotation, one on the right side and the weakening one on the left side. So overall this storm is collapsing and it is now becoming the Americans' problem. It is heading across the lake, and NWS will be tracking it because it did have a tornado warning on our side of the lake as well. So it is a storm that was worth noting for them. So again here, rain wrapped can be an issue. So you can see this kind of area of rotation and rapid cloud growth there. So I zoom in a bit more on it, and you can kind of see in a moment here where the cloud takes kind of a triangle shape, especially right kind of left center right there. And now you can see really kind of robust motion upwards. This is about 4 times faster, but really does give you an idea of what's all happening in there. And then here's a rain-wrapped funnel cloud that does touch down briefly. So it does turn into a tornado. So to see a rain-wrapped funnel cloud, you have to kind of be in the northeast position here. So there's the funnel developing a little bit of a ribbon. We kind of get into some trees, which the Brantford area has plenty of. And you'll actually get to see here in a moment when I get to my bearings straight. There is a bit of debris. I do show it to you in a moment here because it's very hard to see on your screen. And but you will see where I kind of zoom up or look upwards, and there's your funnel cloud right there. So you can see halfway down. So just because the condensation is not down to the surface does not mean that it's not making contact. So I darken the contrast and slow things down here. Here's a few screen grabs. So there's some of your debris basically rotating around the base. There's your funnel about halfway down at that point. And now we're going to replay through it again, and I darken it. So there's you can see the debris spinning around there. Some of it goes right up into the funnel more there. So it was just a brief touch, a very weak tornado, but overall still one that was very short-lived. One of the funny things is I'm a birder, so I remember saying to my buddy, I was chasing with my other storm chase friend, Kyle Robertson, and I said to him, oh my gosh, the winds are so strong it's throwing birds into the ground. Fortunately, what it was tobacco leaves from the field where the tornado had picked some of them up. And so all I can say is I promise that no birds were harmed during this portion of the film, because it is actually tobacco leaves. So you can see them kind of fluttering in the air, and they were fluttering, which kind of gave me the impression that they were actually birds. So now we're going to take you up to the Walkerton area, and this is the same day that the Acton area had the tornado there. But overall, we were chasing a supercell that happened north of Walkerton, and you can see kind of this very low cloud. There was a tornado reported. We were not close enough to see rotation. It was near the Cargill area. And so here's your rotating wall cloud. So at this point, I'm kind of watching it. To me, it looks like it's gusting out, but you'll get to see kind of an interesting feature develop on the back side of it. Here's over about the center of the barn there. You'll see kind of a triangle shape in the cloud take hold there. Basically what that is potentially a funnel cloud, but for us, we're too far away. It's a very heavy wooded area down there, so we decided to stay up to the ridge. But it is potentially rotating, but it could just be scud, which is basically your warm, moist air being pulled up into it without rotation. So we were unable to confirm anything with that aspect. Now we're going to take a bit of a look at a whirlwind here. So they're basically the smallest, and then we have a gustnado. So you have your gust front here, and then you can see kind of a little cup shape of debris below, which is just basically dust. I call it the weaker cousin of the tornado, because of the fact that it's the straight line winds can actually blow them right out. So when I put the time lapse into motion here, you actually get to see that, where the straight line winds overpower it, and basically nothing happens with it. So they remove twigs and leaves off the trees, but that's generally it when it comes to gustnados. Here's a shear funnel that's formed on this very small cloud. I always say whenever you have a vortice or anything rotating, it's still worth watching just in case, but in this particular instance, you can just see you have your funnel cloud underneath it, and it's a very small cloud above, very small structure. Then there's times where you're trying to run errands, you've got things to do, and you get this funnel cloud that happens when you're at a red light, so you quickly try to get to an opening, you get to an open field, and you are able to capture the end of it. And so this is November 23rd. I was not looking for funnel clouds that day, but I saw one over the St. Catharines area. And what was really neat about that was actually up near the Prescott area in eastern Ontario, there was actually a tornado that happened, and it hit while it was snowing. So next time you're looking at a snow squall, I don't want you worrying that there's actually a tornado in that. It was very special and rare conditions for that to all come together. But it did actually destroy a barn's roof and a few things like that. And wasn't just rated an EF0, it was actually an EF1. And then here we are with a shear funnel on November 24th, a year later. So those are the only two funnels I've ever captured in the month of November. And then here's your mesocyclone coming into Brantford. You can see that circular shape. Well, my dad and I are used to basically storm chasing out with kind of the cows and in the woods and stuff like that. So when we were at the Wendy's Tim Hortons kind of off the 403 there in Brantford, I started to see this cloud get organized very quickly here. So I yelled to my dad, I said, Dad, funnel cloud, funnel cloud. Well, I was right next to the drive-through, so all of a sudden I see a whole bunch of heads basically turn and look at it with a concerned look on their face. And I don't blame them, but I told them it was going the other way, it's going the other way. But that can be the difference. We're never trying to cause alarm out there, but sometimes because we're used to being around cows and horses more than anything else, sometimes yelling and communicating with each other can cause that as well too. So we're very careful on that. That's the only time that has actually happened. And we are one of the few storm chase teams that will actually work at night and in Ontario. And you can see here we have a supercell storm, and you're going to see it. We have to go by the flash of lightning. You're fortunately being able to see it here in slow motion. Then I'll actually screen grab it for you. So we have to analyze it very quickly when it comes to basically seeing that flash and kind of taking a mental image of it in our head. And so you can see actually here the RFD cut, that rounder top, and then at the bottom there is where it's pulling in the more moist air. And so we continued after it. And one of the reasons why, or some of the things that we look for out there, is basically two things. And that is, we're looking for kind of power flashes without lightning triggering them. And so in this case, we actually have a random power flash, which tells us there's could be a tornado at the back of the storm, but it's more likely straight line winds potentially with it, or just winds in general. It doesn't necessarily mean there's a tornado there for sure. Whereas in this case, watch when the power goes out. This is a tornado warned storm over St. Mary's, Ontario. And you can see the lightning flashes and then the power goes out. So that generally means that there's not a tornado with it. That is lightning associated. Still in a tornado warned storm, you still want to be in the basement regardless. Here's a look at a tornadic supercell up near Lake Simcoe, and you can see that real sharp anvil shape. It almost looks like a mothership. And then here's your updraft at the back and lightning here, and it had just produced a tornado earlier on. We've never photographed a tornado at night, but we have got a water spout at night over Lake Erie. This was in May of 2014, and you can see that my dad took that photo of it. Here's an overall thunderhead look. Then you have the lightning from the top of the storm in the background, and then again you can see kind of that potential water spout under there. That one wasn't as well defined. And so now we're going to take a look at water spouts. So there's your water spout. You got a bit of a spray ring at the bottom, and they form along convergence lines, and you need that at least a 13-degree difference between the water's surface and then the 850 millibar level, 1500 meter level, or 5,000 foot level. And that is when you get them kind of converging in one zone. It allows for vortices to form at the surface, and then as they get stretched up by a towering cumulus cloud, it tightens up almost like a figure skater. And then as they speed up, that's when you start to get even more of the potential for condensation and that full contact with the cloud and the surface. So here's an example of an intense spray ring. It already went in. You saw some of the debris lofted off the trees there, and another one following suit. Well, as we were watching that one, we actually had another one come right in on our location as well too. So this is kind of almost the inside of it as you're looking at it here. So pretty intense moments there, as a number of them actually came in offshore of Lake Huron. So you can see a lot of the twisting and the vortice movement inside of it, and then it passes on by. So this is the most common type. This is your fair weather water spout. So you can kind of see it there where you have the fully condensed, and then it basically dissipated. That was in 1 minute and 32 seconds sped up for you to see kind of the full process of it there. This is a land spout, so you can see the funnel, that bowl shape at the top, and then you have the vortice at the bottom. This was up near the Listowel area, and they form under similar circumstances, and basically, but it's over land instead. And so you can see it kind of, it's got that kind of real kind of circular shape to it. It's very disorganized. This one was rated an EF0, so to give you an idea, the scale goes up to EF5, and so an EF0, very weak. It caused very minor damage, but was confirmed by Environment Canada to be a tornado that lasted around 7 kilometers in length. So you can see here, at times it tries to get some tighter vortice action to it as well. Not very, like I said, not very organized, but still enough to create some damage and loft some very small debris. So land spouts tend to be more, I find, in the spring, and but they can happen at any time of year, but generally I do find them to be in the spring to be some of the best conditions, because you tend to get more of a temperature difference there, and you can see kind of there, that was probably at its strongest point there, where you can really see that kind of cup shape to it. And so now I'm going to take you through a 45-minute storm chase here in 3 minutes. So sometimes we wish we could go that fast out there, but you can see now we kind of have a roll cloud or gust front feature coming towards us. We're about to go underneath it. So when we were first looking at radar, we could see the rotation on it, and we thought, okay, we're going to be getting close to a potential for a tornado here. But then when we got underneath it, you can actually see very disorganized, kind of elevated, and not really doing much at all at this point. So we thought, well, let's go back to the front here and get a gust front picture at least, or some video of it. So as we were working ourselves back to the front here, we're almost about to do a full circle. As we get up closer to the stop sign here, it's actually starting to reorganize. So you'll see it right on this kind of right turn here, right there. There's where it's getting organized again, and now we have a rotating wall cloud. So we pull over because we worked ourselves back in front of it. Now we got to get behind it again, and I want you to watch the top of your screen right here because of the fact you'll get to really see how it's turning. It's turning right in on itself, and we're right basically underneath the base of the rotating wall cloud here. So now you can see very low to the ground as well too, which generally the lower the rotating wall cloud, the less energy it takes to actually produce a tornado because of the fact that it's already so close to the surface, whereas the higher it is, the more energy it takes to actually make that kind of ground connection to form a funnel and etc. like that. So overall you can see we're really close to the surface here, but also started to note that yes, it's got areas organized very much just above the treetops there, but there's not rotation at the surface there. You can actually see the clouds more rising than anything. You saw a bit of an inflow feature there. And also the cloud is kind of turning in different areas, so it's never really getting organized until near the end of its lifespan. And you can actually see the storm itself is actually smaller at this point. So when we got onto it, it was around 28,000 feet, whereas now it's just around 12 to 15,000 feet. So it has shrunk quite a bit, and now is losing its upper level support as well too. So now we're going to move on to a storm that actually does produce a tornado. And so first what we're looking at here is your updraft, so your rotating wall cloud. This is where everything is coming together. You got your warm, moist air pouring into the storm. And then on the other side of the storm, so we're looking at the north side here, this is where the RFD, the rear flank downdraft, is now starting to wrap around the back of the storm. So it's all starting together. You have your warm inflow and then the rear flank downdraft. And you actually get to see some gulls flying to the top of your screen here, and they were actually riding along the rear flank downdraft. And my dad and I have often joked that if we could have smoke or something out there that would identify how the winds are behaving, that we'd be able to see what's going on quite mechanically. Well, apparently all you have to do is bribe some gulls with McDonald's and they do that work for you, and it's even more environmentally friendly. So as you can see here, you'll see the kind of the funnel cloud starting to take form in the center, and then you have the overall rotating wall cloud starting to take on a real organized look. So all the shear is working together compared to that first one, which was ripping from here, rotating from there, and basically wrapping around. It's like multiple different areas. This one's very organized, and when I speed up the time lapse, you can see it's still wrapping. Still have the kind of the rising motion on the right side of your screen, but overall you're starting to get that cylinder shape or circular shape in the wall cloud, and then you have your funnel cloud below. It is likely on the ground at this point. It's just it wasn't fully condensed. There was other chasers on it and saying there was debris before it fully condensed. But now you can see for us from our position, we're now able to confirm that yes, it has touched down. There has been a tornado. And I speed up the rest of it so that you can see it kind of get really anchored in at this point. So it's really upright, and the wall cloud is still very, very healthy. So the next thing we basically decide from at this point is to go after it. It's because it's now starting to pull away from us. It's got a very well-defined west to east motion to it. Fortunately not moving that fast either, so it allowed us to catch up to it again very easily. You can really see the rotating wall cloud as that really circular cylinder shape to it, and it looks very well organized. Well, it hit a wooded area shortly after that other clip you were looking at, and you can see how the tornado looks like it's getting dragged behind, kind of tilted and stretched, and it's losing that real tight form it had earlier. That's because winds like to work in a way that they're not affected by objects, and even friction at this point is playing a role, and winds are starting to kind of get bent here and there because of objects like trees and stuff. So for example, waterspouts, they form easily because the vortice is not disrupted, whereas in this case it's kind of got things tearing away at it. Now if it was a larger tornado, it would just plow right through that without an issue, whereas this one, it held up a little bit. You could see it actually affect the whole entire structure as it did, but now you can see it's perfectly upright again basically, and fully in full function there. So quickly hop out of the vehicle. You can see now we have the tornado basically perfectly down the road, just off to the left a little bit. So now my job becomes making it look pretty. So as I leave my video camera in one location, I do my 125-meter dash to get the grain field in front of it as foreground, and then even the another barn that I saw a little further on. But while all that was happening, we can actually see we have the main tornado and even a side vortice there. And then we also have a new area that looks to be developing, and when I speed it up you can see it lifting, and then the tornado is still on the ground despite the fact that the condensation's almost around halfway down. And so as I was out photographing the storm from the barn area, this was all going on. You're basically seeing a secondary area try to develop where we're either going to have a satellite tornado or funnel, or potentially a new one form while the one on the left cycles down. This one develops into the main tornado. But you can kind of tell above here that the cloud itself, not much of an updraft, it's very wispy, and the funnel right now is actually more horizontal. So you could kind of tell that it was not as strong as what we were first looking at, but it's really neat. You can actually see the funnel going out further yet there. So this is that horizontal shear, and it's basically the updraft that will cut that, and then the rear flank downdraft that helps kind of push that down. But there wasn't enough of that in this case. As you can see, the structure is very wispy. So we have the funnel basically going horizontal, and it actually even changes sides here. And then after I come back from my 125-meter dash, you'll actually get to see how long that funnel cloud did eventually get, but it never had a chance to come down towards the surface. It basically stayed horizontal. So again, we continued to push towards the tornado. It lasted for about anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes in length, and you can actually see here where there is actually still some dust at the bottom here, showing where it is making contact with the ground. But you'll actually see a better example of that as we get closer as well too. So in the cloud you can still see kind of that inflow area, and then you have the tornado there. And one of the funny things about when my dad and I are chasing, he knows I love foreground. So I tend to be the type that I like to get a barn or a country house or some sort of foreground into it. So you can see up here in a moment, actually, you'll see a barn kind of in the opening here. And of course we had to turn up that road to get the foreground that I wanted, so that barn there, but also it was more so for the fact the tornado was near the end of its lifespan. You could really see at this point just how high the rotating wall cloud is. It's almost basically the same level as the base of the storm here, but it's still actually on the ground, and you'll get to see that here in a moment because of the fact of some of the large pieces of debris it's lofting. So if you see look on the left side of your screen there, you can actually see two pieces of large debris being lofted up into the air. So despite the fact that the condensation is about halfway up, if not 40% of the way down, it is still picking up some larger pieces of debris. Eventually though, it does dissipate, and instead of roping out where it dissipates in the air, you can actually see it kind of retract back up into the storm. So basically it wanted its funnel back, or tornado back in this case. And so we decide that we're going to continue on. That was in the Arthur area, Arthur to Grand Valley. And then we decided to continue on, because whenever you ever have a tornado-warned storm and it has produced a tornado already, there's always a chance it could produce another one. So we continue towards the Orangeville-Caledon direction, and you can still see the updraft on the back of it, and then it got reorganized here. You can see the new base forming, but you probably can tell the difference between the first time it produced a tornado and now. This is a lot more elevated. It's still got the wind shear in it, still got the turbulent looking skies, but it's not as low as the first time. And then eventually when it does form a funnel, which you can just see here in the center left of your screen, you can tell that the storm itself is not very healthy. So we pull over, and basically we have the funnel right in the center of the screen here, and this one actually does rope out. It actually just kind of collapses on itself in a really neat way, as you'll see in the time lapse. But what I really want you to look at is actually the top of your screen there. See that cloud in the center there that's rotating? That's some of the inner vortices. It's almost like an x-ray on the storm's health, or an x-ray with the vortices going on in it. I replay it for you as well too, because if the storm hadn't collapsed so fast, we wouldn't have got to see some of the inner workings, some of the inner vortices that are taking place in the storm. So that was one really neat moment to have take place there. And then we went back, and where that tornado looked like it was getting shredded a bit or altered a bit. This is what it was hitting at that time, a little forested area with some pines and spruce. So overall, it wasn't a huge tornado. It was a perfect tornado. It didn't hurt anybody. It didn't really destroy much in the way of property. And yes, you're seeing lots of names here. It's more so because I love doing what they do with the superhero movies and putting in a little bonus clip at the end. I want you to count those lightning strikes. I do actually replay it a couple more times. I love getting answers because I've never truly counted myself, so I don't really know the answer. But overall, I'll let you get the last bit here. Overall, I generally get a number of, I'll wait for the slow motion to quit here, but generally I get about 7 to 11. 7 to 11 is what people count. And then kids, sometimes they get it up to 25 to 30 because I think they're just counting as fast as they can while the lightning strikes. Who knows? But anyways, regardless, that is the presentation, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Plus, really learned a lot from it as well, too. And I know that it's a program that took years to make, but overall, in the end, it was really worth it to see Ontario in all of its action when it comes to storms, all various types. Thank you for watching. Take care.